Almost
Good
live.
evening.
It's just preparing. We are live.
All right. Welcome everyone to this meeting. This meeting is now called to order. We have regrets from two members, Rob Adlam and Susan Kaplan, and the clerk has taken the roll call. As this is our first meeting, virtual meeting, we have some kind of guidelines to go over just to make sure that we try and run the meeting as efficiently as possible. All members should be muted when not speaking, and this reduces feedback. All webcams should be turned on for Heritage Committee members. If you turn off your webcam, it's like you're not here. Staff will be requested to join the video meeting should the need for answers to questions arise. Persons who have registered for this meeting and who are on the speaking applications will be brought into the meeting upon the introduction of the item. Any member of the committee, should they indicate wanting to speak to an item, you should use the raise hand function, and then I will be able to see that you would wish to speak. In the event of connection or service interruption that affects the quorum of the Heritage Committee, we may recess the meeting for up to 15 minutes to regain quorum. If quorum is not achieved, the meeting will be adjourned. All members of the Heritage Committee participating via online video conference will vote by show of physical hands. The chair will indicate for you to raise your hands until he has determined the results of the vote. If you declare a conflict of interest during the course of the meeting, you should turn off your camera for that item. Finally, thank you for the patience that you are showing as we navigate through this new pathway. So moving down through the agenda, we are now on item 2, declarations of conflicts of interest. If you have a conflict, now is the time to declare it. Seeing none, there are no delegations for tonight's meeting. We move on to item 4, which is items for consideration. I would like to call upon Jim Wallace from Arcus Architects, Inc. to commence his presentation on behalf of the applicant. Mr. Wallace, as a reminder, you have 10 minutes for your presentation, inclusive of questions from the committee. So, Mr. Wallace, over to you.
Good evening, everybody. I believe I've unmuted now, so I think I can be heard. Excellent. Well, thank you, guys. I understand it's a challenging time, but I appreciate that the city has made this available to us in order to continue to proceed in a semi-orderly fashion with these applications. This is an application that has come before the committee at the end of 2019. It was an application to seek approval for an alteration to an existing structure at 268 Brant Avenue. At the time, committee had approved it. As well, recommendation from city staff had determined that it was appropriate and was such approved. As we've moved through the building permit process, we encountered an exiting problem from the basement as a function of the design. And two proposals were discussed between ourselves and the owner. The first being to take an existing window opening on the left side of the building, if you're looking at the front, along the side elevation, to permit a door from the ground level. Unfortunately, that was deemed to be too detrimental to the layout of the ground floor. So another proposal was brought forward to request a door from the basement with an exterior stair via the side yard. Fundamentally, the design of the front of the building, the materials, there's no change proposed in the look of the building from the perspective of the street, i.e. the public realm remains unaltered. But in order to satisfy code and be least impactful, we felt that this would be appropriate as exiting requirement from the basement. Staff had determined that it was considered a major change and we would have to bring forward an addendum to the committee for their consideration. So that's what we're doing today. I hope the committee has had a chance to review the documents that we provided to staff, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions that the committee members may have. I certainly hope I did this right and everybody was able to hear my brief presentation. Judging by a few smirks, I would say so. So that's good to know. It's good to know.
Okay. I can't see anything or anyone.
Oh.
Does anyone have any questions for, I see a hand, Councillor McCreary.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Will the architect be specifying a painting technique to apply over the brick?
There are two options that we're looking at right now. One of them is to stain the brick, which is more of an impregnation of the stain into the brick. It's a little bit more permanent, but it's definitely much more expensive to do. The other one is to just paint the surface. We've done it in the past to varying degrees of success. I prefer staining. I think that's a more robust way to do it because painting, if it gets chipped or damaged, you end up seeing the color behind it. What we had presumed committee would be most concerned about this evening and reviewing this application in general as it relates to staining the brick is to ensure that the color is appropriate and that it matches the siding, the horizontal siding that's proposed for the building, a product specified by Mabec. That being said, as in means and methods, I would prefer it to be stained. I don't know if the committee has a preference either way, as long as the color is clearly described and disclosed. I'm not sure that answers your question, sir, but that is something that we are considering with respect to the means and methods of applying. Is there a preference that the committee has with respect to application of the paints to the brick?
Thank you for your answer. You're correct in stating that sometimes there's varying degrees of success with respect to applying paint to brick. But I'd wait to hear what the other members have to say.
Okay, Councillor Wall.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair. So if I'm not mistaken, the alteration that you're making is just the code. The property was built before the same standards that we apply to properties that are now. So you're just doing this to make it up to code, right?
Yes, sir. That is exactly what we're doing. The design required second and separate egress from the basement. The owners will be using the basement as occupiable space. And in order to satisfy the code, there was two ways we could handle it. Enclosing the stairs at the ground floor to provide egress directly outside through the side yard by a surface door, or separate the basement from the ground floor, providing a door subgrade with a walk-up stair exterior. So yes, it's strictly related to an open building permit application to satisfy the building code.
So this is a matter of the safety of the occupants and the public.
Absolutely. It's all about life safety at this point.
And then, Chair, if I may ask a question to staff. So this property itself is designated because it's a part of the Brant Ave Heritage District.
Councillor Wall, we do have a presentation from staff after this.
Oh, perfect.
So would you like, perhaps that's a better time to ask that question.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any other member of the committee have any questions for the proponent? Bev?
Yeah, I just want to ask, the brick currently isn't painted, correct? It's just the buff or yellowy colored brick that's there now.
Yeah, that's correct. I don't believe the stone is that original sort of yellow brick from the 60s, and then there's
Yeah.
an angel stone that's clad on the front of it. So yes, it is an original brick.
Okay.
Any other questions, Bev?
No,
Okay. That I was going to ask that question about the brick of the building. You know, that it's that traditional Brantford white color, but the building does not look like you know, an early 1800s structure. It was built in the 60s. Is that what you were telling us?
I believe the vintage of the building is 1958, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for our proponent before I turn it over to staff? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Wallace.
No, sorry, Mr. Chairman. Cindy MacDonald is waving her hands.
Oh, I can't see Cindy.
Oh, sorry.
That's why. Go ahead, Cindy. Sorry.
No, I'm quite familiar with this building because my doctor's office, Dr. Phillison, that was his office I know from the 60s anyways. And just the only point I wanted to make, because I think it has little impact on the look of the front of the building, is that the stain is very successful and has been successful in Brantford. It looks good. I think it has less maintenance than painting, but since you asked, I'm certainly in favor of staining. I find it's a terrific way to refresh the brick and make everything look even when you're doing it. So yeah, I'm all for it. Thanks.
Thank you.
That's it. Yeah, no other comment.
Okay, thanks, Cindy. Sorry, I missed you there.
No, that's okay.
Okay, over to staff for the staff report.
Thank you, Chair. I believe the clerk will be putting up a presentation. Thank you, Chris. So the subject property is within the Brant Avenue Heritage Conservation District. I think this may be the next staff presentation.
Yeah.
Sorry, one moment. Sorry, to continue. So the property is within the Brant Avenue Heritage Conservation District. It has frontage on Brant Avenue, but it's also a through lot. So it has frontage onto Ada Avenue at the rear. The next slide shows pictures of the front of the building as seen from Brant Avenue, as well as the rear, which is currently functioning as a parking lot. The alterations in this case mainly deal with the Ada Avenue frontage, or the rear of the building. So the first alteration, the previous alteration, I should say, is HA 0619. The committee previously dealt with this in 2019 and approved the addition to the front of the building. So that matter has already been approved. It has been considered. The changes that are before you today are revisions that are being made because of the results of the prior alteration. As the applicant has indicated, there are some building permit concerns that were raised after Heritage Committee had granted its approval. So the first alteration for consideration is the below grade exit and exterior stairway. As the applicant had indicated, this is to satisfy building code concerns. Staff considered the matter, and given the two options that were discussed, an at grade exit replacing one of the existing side windows, or a below grade exit, we feel that because the exit is located at the rear of the property, it is sunken below grade with only a railing showing. It allows the alteration will conform to building code requirements, but it will be sympathetic to the character of the building. There will be no negative effects due to the addition of an exterior stairway. The second alteration that has been discussed is the painting of the side and rear brick walls to match the approved siding on the front wall of the dwelling or the building. Staff considered the guidelines for the Brant Avenue Heritage Conservation District, and the guidelines do support some painting of brick in certain instances. The guidance really is for where paint is being used. If it is in a traditional color or an earth tone, where it is used, it should be used to also in a multi-color scheme that emphasizes the architectural features of the structure. In this case, the building is much later than some of the more prominent buildings on the street. It's a much more simple, streamlined artistic style, so it does not contain the same architectural features. So staff were supportive on the basis that the paint is a neutral or earth tone, and it is being used in an appropriate context. There's no architectural features to use multiple colors to sort of emphasize. So one color scheme can be appropriate for the building. Accordingly, staff reviewing the applications feels that both alterations can be approved.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Now, questions, any questions for staff? Councillor Wall?
Yes, thank you. Through you. As I mentioned earlier, my comments about the property being in the Heritage District, are there aspects of the property that are of note?
So the Heritage District Study and Guidelines do rank certain properties through a landmark status being the highest, and there are sort of lower tiers. The property is also identified because it's a later addition to the district. It is not at the same level of heritage concern as other properties, more prominent or earlier properties. So therefore, staff are taking the approach that there is a bit more flexibility in alterations to this property. The alterations are sympathetic to the character of the district, to the design of the building, and therefore staff feels are appropriate.
And then, forgive me, I mean, I was paying attention. I heard the words, you said something about how something changed after it was approved by the Heritage Committee. Could you reference that again?
Yes, so after the Heritage Committee approved alteration HA 0619, the applicant submitted their building permit, and through building permit review, the need for a second exit was discovered.
Okay, and that's
so,
why it's back before us today.
Correct.
Okay, so again, I know that staff are recommending we approve this project, and I'm prone to agree. This is, if anything, going to improve the building rather than detract from historic elements of the building.
Staff are of the opinion that this is these are sympathetic alterations, and they do respect the character of the dweller, the building, and the district.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wall. Any other member have any questions for staff? I'm trying to cycle through my screen, make sure I'm not missing anyone this time. Okay, thank you very much for your report, Patrick. So now we're at the stage where I need a motion. So there is the recommendation in staff's report that it be approved. Is anyone wanting to move that motion? Cindy, a seconder for the motion. Oh, I saw Peter's hand first, I think. Any discussion on the approval? Anyone raising their hand? Okay, I don't see so. So I'll ask you to raise your hand to indicate your vote, and please keep it up until I've concluded the vote, because I have to cycle through the screens, okay? All those in favor? Okay. All those opposed? I declare the motion carried. Thank you very much. We will now move along to item 4.2 on the agenda, which is a proposed alteration to 235 Brant Avenue, just across the street. I would like to call on Patrick Trottier, PDT Architects, to commence his presentation on behalf of the applicant. I'd remind Mr. Trotter that you have 10 minutes inclusive of your presentation and questions.
Hello, does anybody see me out there? Do you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I guess you don't need to see me. That's okay. I guess there's a visual that was sent by email. Hang on a sec. There we go. I'm still learning about the Zoom stuff. Sorry about that. So this is for St. Joseph's Church. It's a very simple south stair addition. Back in 2012, St. Joseph's Church went through a similar process of adding an entry lobby, elevator, and stair. It was to make the building more accessible to the congregation and to make a stair weatherproof. The south stair was left open, and over the years, Father Adam has indicated to me that there have been a few slips and falls during the winter on that south stair. And so the intention is just something very, very simple, just to enclose it in a glass enclosure. The enclosure would mimic the work that was done back in 2012. The enclosure would bring itself in line with the addition of 2012, which is the elevator addition. You see that it's a Ariscraft type of brick with the logo on it that looks like a type of sail flag that's painted red and white on the masonry. It would be in line with that, which would be set back from the octagon that you see there, which is a rotunda, a gathering space inside. And the addition would bring itself back to the existing tower. It would join a buttress, so that it would be as clean and simple of an addition as possible. Actually trying not to draw any attention to it, but just seamlessly fit itself into the facade from left to right. Left meaning the 2012 edition, right, which is the new edition. And blending back into the St. James Tower facade. It's a one-story. The height would be a little higher than the 2012 entry, simply because the south doors of the rotunda have this really nice arched window to it, and we don't want to change anything about the rotunda. As well, the tower facing Brant Avenue and St. James also has a beautiful arched window on both of the facades. We want to bring the roof just above those so that we don't interrupt the arch at all. And the enclosure would bring the Brant Street Tower facade into the addition, similarly to how it was done back in 2012 for the other addition. And we would match all the existing materials from the stone base to the glass wall, the storefront glazing, aluminum framing. I understand that there's a desire from the Heritage Committee to lighten up the glass as much as possible to allow a clear visual of the Brant Street facade of the tower. We're in keeping with those thoughts. We just want to do a little bit of study about heat gain in that space. And if anything, we may need to have a bit of a shading coefficient added to that glass so that it tries to shield out some of the solar rays from the south and western sun. But our intention is certainly to keep it as clear and open as possible. And that's essentially it. There's a bit of a landscape space that's going to be added to it, simply because we're taking up more concrete walk space. We're going to bring up the landscape space to the entry doors. The rest of the landscape won't be touched at all. It'll be reconstructed as how it is now. And that's pretty much it. If I can offer any more clarifications, I'd be happy to.
Okay, thank you. We do have some hands raised here. So first we have Councillor McCreary.
Mr. Chair, thank you. There's no elevation drawing demonstrating the height of that roof as compared to the round-headed window on the original tower. I wonder if you could comment on that.
On the original tower, yeah, the intent is to go above the arch, the masonry arch of the original tower, and some more investigations of measurements on site will have to clarify where that lies. There is a bit of a pickle with the existing flat roof that's in the back of the rotunda. We need to drain down from that roof because all the drainage is coming down from that roof down into the landscape area.
So the drawing that we see here is not comparable to the actual building. The projecting tier of brickwork above the round-headed window doesn't appear on the drawing, and it looks as though your roof line is going to at least partly obscure the round-headed brick detail. So I'm not sure how you're going to pull that rabbit out of that hat, given the elevations that you can see with respect to the rotunda addition.
Keep in mind that this is a conceptual rendering. It's not a technical drawing. And so the precise heights are not in this drawing. But you're right, these are details that will be worked out. We have a lot of respect for this building. We don't want to do anything to harm its character in any way. So we'll pay close attention.
You're also going to be removing the entire stairway there and replacing it?
That's right, yes. Yes, and the new stairway will be a stair that will match the existing stairway that's in the north addition.
And there's no handrail demonstrated on the drawing, but I presume that's just an omission, right?
Yeah, this is a conceptual rendering.
Yeah. Okay, now, so is your plan to come back to the committee with a finished drawing for comment?
We will do whatever is required for the committee.
Okay, because I don't speak for the committee, of course, but we certainly don't want to see any of the architectural detail obscured by this addition. And with respect to shading, I don't think we want anything but clear glass there. And it may get a bit warm, but perhaps you can accommodate that somehow with some other method of keeping that space cool.
Do you want to respond to that, Mr. Trotter?
We will investigate that with mechanical systems, and I'll speak to our mechanical engineer to see what we can do about that.
Okay, thank you. I take it that was it for you, Councillor McCurry?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm finished. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to Councillor Wall.
Great, thank you very much. Through you. So of course, the safety of our residents is paramount. So of course, if this needs to be addressed for safety issues, let's figure it out. I'm not a fan of what I'm seeing in the design. This is the forward-facing part of this church, and it doesn't, to me, it's not period. It doesn't fit the building. I'm curious, how many means of entrance are there into this building?
There's the existing entry. Currently there are two. It's the south stair that you're looking at and the north stair.
So, I mean, perhaps it's just through the rendering that I see. I mean, is this an accessible entrance?
No, it's not. The 2012 is.
Is the intention to make it an accessible entrance?
No, it's not.
So, I mean, okay. I don't know that you can even answer this question. The thing that we're here to discuss is whether or not this fits, whether the Heritage Committee is going to support this or not. And I don't, like Councilor McCurry said, speak for the Heritage Committee. I speak for myself. If we're worried about patrons of the church slipping and falling, I would imagine that they would use the accessible entrance, which is made for people who have accessibility issues. Why are we forever altering the front facade of this building to cover it with a giant glass wall? How is this not able to just be simply done with an overhang or something that prevents the stairs from getting rained on, why does it have to be enclosed with this big giant glass box? Why is it the church is asking to do this, or is this the suggestion of the designers or planners?
It's the original concept of the church who want to have the stair enclosed for safety.
Okay.
So, I'm out of time.
I'm sorry, Council Wall, our time is up. Okay, our time is up for Mr. Trotcher and his questions. We'll move on to staff.
I have another question, if I may.
No,
It's a clarification
no.
question.
Your time is up, sir. We will move on to the presentation by staff.
Thank you, Chair. This is the second alteration for consideration tonight, HA 0220. The first slide will give a overview of the location. The property is at the corner of St. James Street and Brant Avenue. The church occupies the southern portion of the property, situated essentially right at the corner of the property and the corner of the two streets, with an interaction to the intersection. The next slides show the three views of the building. The top view shows the previously approved 2012 edition, which houses a lift for accessibility purposes to make the building accessible. The rotunda predates the Brant Avenue Heritage Conservation District being approved and adopted by the city of Brantford. So the previous edition really just ties into an existing alteration that predates the district study. The bottom left view shows the present front view of the church, looking from a kitty corner position at Brant Ave, showing the relationship between the rotunda and the stair entrance and the base of the existing tower. And the third image in the bottom right shows the view of the church from St. James Street. The next slide shows, much as was shown for the architect's Patrick Trotter's presentation and discussion, a view of the proposed addition in context with the existing front facade of the church. As was indicated, the intent is to enclose the stairway to make it safe in inclement weather so that parishioners can access the building without the risk of tripping and falling. As part of the alteration, the existing stairs will be removed and new, shorter stairway will be constructed within the glass enclosure. Additional drawings, the plan view is on the next slide. So this plan view shows the scope and scale of the footprint of the stairway addition. As Patrick Trotter had mentioned, the intent is to really keep the addition within the existing front corner of the church, to be respectful of existing setbacks to the building from both streets. When staff reviewed the alteration, we considered the guidelines of the district and as well as practice that there is some expectation that new additions have legibility against the original structure, so that a building, when looked at, it is clear and distinguishable what parts are original to the building and where additions have been made. In this case, staff considered the vertical orientation of the windows. As shown on the next slide, we have a zoom in of the rendering that was prepared. Additional plan drawings are actually available in the staff report and the appendices. We have attached those for committee to review. Vertical oriented glass respects the original vertical emphasis of the architecture of the church. The Romanesque round windows are still very, very narrow and tall. So the alteration, by adding this, adding vertical emphasis on the glass and keeping the alteration to a low height, we find that it does not impact the landmark character of the church. As was indicated, the glass, looking for a lighter tinting coefficient, preserves the relationship between the existing front windows in the tower and the interaction with the intersection of St. James Street and Brant Avenue. The ability of this design, it matches, but the existing, the design of the proposed alteration matches the existing alterations that were done in 2012. They are modern style, but again, kept in a fairly restrained minimal height so that the predominant view is still to the church steeple and tower and the architecture. And as was indicated, the existing facade will be retained underneath or within the enclosure. So it's more about providing a roof and glass wall that can be seen into, rather than resulting in an alteration or having an alteration that changes the exterior and bricks in or closes openings. The closure of openings is something that the guidelines do have concerns about, but in this case, because the existing openings are preserved, there is a measure of vertical emphasis and there is a clear view and interaction with the intersection, the streetscape. Staff recommend approval of the alteration. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Okay, Councillor Wall, you have a question.
Pending heritage approval, does this come to council for further discussion, or is this it?
So council has delegated its authority to approve alterations to the Heritage Committee if they are deemed major alterations, or directly to staff if they are deemed minor alterations. So just for context, a minor alteration would be something like maintenance, the repair and repainting of an existing piece of painted trim.
So I don't want to
or-
use up all the time. Is this
Yes.
going to come to council or not?
This will not, if it is approved by the Heritage Committee, this will be considered approved tomorrow.
So we're going to be doing comments afterwards, correct, Chair?
Yes, someone will have to introduce a motion.
Awesome. So my question to staff then is, first is this box design typical of these kind of improvements? And then my next question is the last one, to go up to building code, they had to have that second egress. How are they able to make changes to the stairwell, which is an entry point to the building, without making it accessible? Is that not, doesn't it have to be accessible to be code now if they're changing it?
Through the chair. So I can't speak to a code issue as a planner. I don't work for the building department or have that training, but my understanding is there is an accessible entrance to the building, whereas this is replacing a stairway. So there is an alternative, or there is an option. That's my understanding. With respect to the modern design, I cannot speak for every scenario. However, there are instances where historic buildings do have additions put onto them that are of a modern design with, as we see here, a glass sort of curtain wall, a masonry material to tie it in. I cannot say if it's universal. Every context, every situation is unique and has its own context.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions from the committee? Ed, did you have your hand up? Yeah, go ahead, Ed.
There's been so many changes to the front of the church. I grew up going here. The window that you're trying to protect within the sort of the glass box, that was once a staircase that led down towards Brant Ave, and around the corner where the other window is, that was a second staircase, and I still have my confirmation pictures from there. So this front has been changed a great deal over the years. Yeah, just where you're looking there. Those were staircases that went down, and then they added, I think, at least 2 other renovations already. So I get this. And the other thing is, for people who had problems in the old days with all the stairs, they can also exit at the front. There's only about 2 or 3 stairs, if I remember right. And so the older people, they would tend to go out the front, and everyone else came out the back. So I think when they added the elevator, I think that was more convenient. So both staircases in the back lead to the same space. So I hope that helps.
Okay. So that wasn't a question, more of a comment, but Councillor McCreary, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. Through you to staff. There's no urgency to this application, I would presume.
As it stands, the Heritage Act allows for a 90-day time frame to make a decision.
Okay, so as I mentioned to the proponent, the information before us tonight isn't conclusive in terms of demonstrating that there's no obscuring of architectural features on the front of this building. So I would ask if you agree that it's within the Heritage Committee's mandate to ask that they resubmit and provide elevation drawings to demonstrate that the features aren't going to be obscured.
Patrick?
I think the committee would have the ability to approve or approve with conditions. I think a deferral, if it's coming back to the committee, could be a possibility, as long as it is within the statutory timeframe.
Can you let us know where we are within that statutory timeframe, please?
My understanding is we are not yet at the 30-day mark. The total of 90 days would allow for, we try to bring items to the committee within 1 month of receiving the application. There were some alterations, change of the options, so we had to consider a new time frame, as it was not something we discussed at the very beginning of the process. 1 cycle may be possible, 2 or more may not allow time for this matter to be considered within the time frame. It may become automatically approved.
So if the committee deems this application incomplete this evening, does the clock start over?
So it's not under the Heritage Act a matter of a committee decision. It is when a notice of receipt is issued, and the city has issued a notice of receipt of the application because of the material that was also submitted along with the rendering. That material is included within the report, and it does include elevations of the addition, in addition to site plan drawings.
Sorry, I don't see any elevations here that demonstrate what it's going to look like with respect to the window. There's a line drawing, but it's not an artist's rendering that would show what it looks like. And if you look at the line drawing clearly demonstrates that all the architectural features are obscured.
Nicole, do you want to, I see that you come on, you want to provide some clarity here to something?
I do. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify, and I guess it's a question, and sorry, I don't have the schedule in front of me, but correct me if I'm wrong. Does the Heritage Committee have a meeting scheduled for July? Generally, the committee takes that month off. If there is no meeting scheduled in July and this won't be reconsidered until August, that may push the time frame to consider this application beyond that statutory time frame.
Thank you for that, Nicole. Meetings are called the chair, so we can have a meeting in July if we need to.
Okay.
I'm not opposed to that. Any other questions? I think we're done with our time for questions for staff. They've had 10 minutes as well. So I think we're to the stage where we need a motion. Anyone wishing to make a motion? Councilor McCurry?
Mr. Chair, yes, I think what I'd like to propose is that the committee invite the proponent to submit renderings of elevations to be provided to us within 30 days, and that the committee then reschedule a meeting to reconsider the amended submission.
Okay, that's a motion. Do we have a seconder for said motion? Cindy? Okay, any discussion on the motion then?
I'll speak to it if I may, just briefly, Mr. Chair.
Sure, go ahead.
I think, based on what we see here before us today, I don't think it's an appropriate renovation. I won't speak to the original renovations that happened at the front of this building, but certainly we have to recognize the architecture of the building, whether or not it's been changed. It's what's designated. And I think they really need to demonstrate to us that they're not going to be obscuring some significant features like was done on prior renovations.
Thank you, Councilor McCurry. Anyone else have a comment? Cindy, go ahead. You're still muted, Cindy.
Press the space bar.
Cindy, you're still muted.
I gotcha.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, I'm very sorry. Sorry about that. Thank you, Chair. I agree with McCreary, Dan McCreary, and I also agree with Councillor Wall, is that I would like this issue of accessibility to be brought to the building committee that deals with it, because I myself think of, if I were to fall down the stairs, am I falling into a glass structure or falling over into a, you know, with the artist's rendering, I can't tell the relationship between the staircase and the enclosure. And when I hear that there is an entrance that is accessible for people, is this really a requirement? I was there in the early 2012 when the designs were for the other side of the building, which was done to make the entrance to that part of the church more accessible for people. So I'm just wondering of the whole viability, and I would agree with Councillor McCreary, but I also agree with Councillor Wall about why are we doing a lot of work to an entrance that in the end will not be accessible for a lot of people that it is supposed to serve to help make safer. So on those both points, I agree. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wall, you put up your hand.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to them changing the staircase. I'm opposed to a permanent alteration to the front of the building that's going to change the design of the building. I just, Cindy said it. I mean, if there's another accessible entrance, this entrance isn't necessary. It can be used, but the reasoning behind it, oh, they need to do it for safety, to me, shouldn't trump, safety is important, but it shouldn't trump this big glass box sticking out on the front of the road of this historic building. And I think that I want to see options. I want to see something else. I want to see something that maintains the character of the building, but also provides safety to people who want to use that entrance. And I think that if they're going to spend all this money to do all this work, it should at least be accessible. I guess I don't think there was enough time to fully discuss this and talk about it the way that I wanted to. And I had a lot more questions, and unfortunately, because of the time limit, I didn't get to ask them to the proponent. I'm not opposed to what they want to do, and I'm not trying to stand in the way of what they want to do. I just think that this maybe isn't the best option right now.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wall. Anyone else wishing to speak to this? Scrolling through, trying to make sure I'm not missing people.
Mr. Chair?
Yep, go ahead.
Could I just get, if you're going to go to vote, can you confirm what we're voting on?
Yes, that is on my list of things to do. I just wanted a brief opportunity to make some comments as well. I noticed the first thing that I noticed with the drawing was the arch appears to be obstructed, and I had significant concerns over that because it does detract from the building, and I wanted to make sure that the arch would still be visible from the street. When you're driving past, can you still see the arch? Because if the roof line is too low, you're never going to be able to see the arch, and it destroys the architecture of the building as well. So those are my reasons why I was not excited about this proposal. Chris, if you're there, can you clarify, remind us of Councillor McCreary's motion?
Through the chair, essentially the motion is to defer the approval for one meeting cycle in July to allow the proponent to provide the committee with the renderings of the elevations.
Okay, so everyone's clear what we're voting on then. Okay, so I will call the question then. All those in favor, keep your hands up please so I can see everyone. Okay, hands down. All those opposed? Perfect. I declare the motion carried. So we will have a meeting in July. Moving on to item 4.3, This is the Museum Sustainability Research and Findings Report. I would call on Sarah Monroe, Manager of Tourism, Culture, and Sport, for an introduction to the topic and to the consultant, Brian. As a reminder, you'll have 10 minutes to present, inclusive of questions.
Thank you, Nathan. Can you hear me?
I can.
Perfect. So just as an update for the project in general, in 2007, Brantford City Council approved the City of Brantford's Museum Sustainability Plan. It was developed to ensure the long-term ongoing viability of Brantford's museum community and provided a framework and strategy to address short-term and long-term challenges and opportunities. At the time, there were 5 Brantford museums that were funded by the city and were part of this plan. In February 2019, our new council approved recommendations to establish their 2019-2020 council priorities, and one of the tasks was to update the museum sustainability plan. In September 2019, Councillor McCreary made the motion to direct staff to update the museum sustainability plan this year. So staff retained Novita Interpairs in November 2019 to complete the consultation and provide recommendations for a growing museum sector. We now actually have 9 museums funded by the city. The final museum sustainability plan will be prepared by staff with an estimated date to present to council in September. The delays are due to COVID-19 at this point, so this is the final consultation that we need to complete the project. And I'd just like to introduce Brian Arnott. He's our consultant from Novita Interpairs who did all of the consultation and prepared the findings report and recommendations.
Thank you, Sarah. Can everyone hear me? I take that as a yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me just kind of do an overview of the summary, if I may. What we found was there was a very strong historical narrative here on 3 particular themes, 2 of which were international and 1 was national in significance. That is the Joseph Brant theme, the Bell theme, and the industrial heritage. A lot of good work is being done currently amongst the 9 museums that Sarah has just referenced. There is a lot of untapped potential, and there are a lot of benefits to be derived by mobilizing that potential. On the other side of things, we found that there's fragmentation everywhere. There's fragmentation in the narrative, there's fragmentation in the market presence, in leadership, in means of achieving collective goals, in means of measuring progress and success. And the other main impediment is, of course, underfunding, that none of these institutions are funded to support their aspirations and their mandates. So in order to fill the gaps that we found, we are looking first to this extraordinary narrative that is those 3 themes that I referred to earlier, and to see that that narrative is developed up and that each of the participating museums has a place and a story to tell within the overall narrative of Brantford and area. We felt that the city can be doing more within its own framework and with its own resources. We're recommending that the city take leadership in creating a tripartite arrangement with 6 Nations and the county because there were museums that were not part of this study, but were part of the Brantford Museum and Gallery Association. So the boundaries, the political boundaries are not the cultural boundaries, I guess we're saying here. And that the city has a role to play in supporting the development of the collective capacity of the Brantford Museums and Gallery Association. We also identified the need to address the industrial heritage part of the narrative. Of the 3, it is the one that needs the most attention. So in terms of recommendations to the city within its own framework, to see the museums as an important asset really is the first thing that the city needs to do. It needs to act on its existing policies. The policy framework here that appears in a variety of the policies and procedures of the city that we looked at support the museums and the development of their potential. We believe that the city should have a comprehensive heritage policy, and that's something that goes beyond the remit of this particular committee and the Ontario Heritage Act. In other words, it takes the entire entire range of heritage narratives, artifacts, and all the oral histories and everything into under a single policy or a single statement of some sort. The city can give its own staff a mandate to move forward a little bit more aggressively on this. We are saying that the city also should invest some money in this in the short term, particularly in the next 2 years, and we've set out a 2-part program for that, and that the city obviously needs to be the leader with respect to pulling together the tripartite group that will then be the governmental, take a governmental leadership role in this. And finally, recommendations to the museum community is to get formally organized, and for the city and the tripartite group to support this. The Brantford Museums and Gallery Association has developed a vision statement as part of this process, and we're suggesting that they should get themselves incorporated and then enter into an agreement with the tripartite partners to move this file forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, that's it for your presentation, Brian? Yep.
Yes.
Okay, we have about 5 minutes left then for questions of the presenter. Does anyone have any questions? I can't see anyone. Cindy, go ahead.
Great. I was just wondering, the third proponent of investing money, did you have a figure or an amount that, and is it coming completely from the city, or is there a component of community resources, or just if you could talk a little more about the money, that would be great.
Is $137,500, and it's from the city's resources. There are also some non-cash contributions, time and city staff time, and it is lined out in the report, and we're indicating that it goes to about. It has about, I can't quickly count them here, but probably about 15 line items that money would be spent on over the coming 2 years, and it's bothly to reinforce within the city, but also to support the development of the museum community through the Brantford Museums and Galleries Association.
And does each museum receive a portion of that money, or is that more of the umbrella of the?
Mr. Chair, through you. This is money that's going to go for the collective effort and to address the collective issues, to address the issues overall. Most of the issues at this point are organizational capacity.
Okay, anything else, Cindy? Okay.
No, thank you. That's great.
Okay, thank you, sorry. Councilor McCurry's first.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Welcome. Good to see you again, Brian. Would you say that it's fair to compare that museums which operate in city facilities do pretty well, the ones that don't operate in city facilities don't do so well?
That's a fair statement, Councilor McCurry, yes.
Would that lead you then to perhaps want to consider imparting in the final version of the report a recommendation that museums operate within municipal facilities?
I want to take that under consideration. I'd like to go back and look at the implications of that, Councillor, before I made a definitive statement.
Yes, I know that was raised a number of times during the meetings, that that was a consideration that we should be looking towards. And I would think in the final report, that deserves a mention, Brian.
All right, thank you. I'll take that up when Sarah and I go to the next round.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. I saw Peter's hand. Go ahead, Peter.
Hi, through you, Nathan, to Brian. Is there further consultations on the different museums? And I guess I'm more specifically wondering about the Brantford Area Sports Hall of Recognition. Is there a chance for any participation on our behalf?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Peter, I'm not exactly certain what you're getting at with that question.
But is there further consultations? I see you've got some ideas, or you've in your presentation to us, to the Heritage Committee. But is there further consultations that you'll be doing on with regards to the different museums?
Through you, Mr. Chair. And there are no more consultations.
Okay.
There are provisions within the budget for workshops and other developmental initiatives, but there are no more consultations scheduled.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Does anyone else want to offer some question? We have about 30 seconds for one more question if someone wants one. Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much, Brian.
Thank you, Nathan.
So we can talk about some comments that we want to include in our motion. So does anyone have a comment that they would like added? And then we'll get a mover and seconder for the motion once we have those comments, so to speak, heard. Oh, that's my timer. Anyone else have a comment? So we don't want any comments forwarded on this presentation. Am I understanding that properly? Cindy?
It was an important distinction that there is a big distinction between the group of museums and specifically whether they're municipally owned or municipally housed. Is that, I think Dan asked whether that was going to be in the final report. Is that something that we need to talk about? Or because there is a disparity, between all of the museums because they're all in different venues that maybe should be addressed. And I'm sure there's probably a need that is more immediate for some than others. Like there are all sorts of different, although we're looking at it as a whole umbrella of museums, there's some that are doing better than others. There's some that are closer to extinction than others, and whether that's something that should be in the final report and talked about, or urgency even. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Cindy would like a comment on Dan's suggestion about city facilities versus the non-city owned facilities. I think that's what we're getting at there. Anyone else have a comment that they would like to be considered to be added? Bev? Bev, you're muted still, sorry.
The report identified the fact that the industrial center really has no presence, no physical space where people can appreciate that component of Brantford's history. And I'm hoping that there can be some recommendations come out of this to provide support for that center, because it's, as Cindy kind of alluded to, some museums are close to extinction, and that is certainly one, and it should never be the value of our industrial heritage should never be lost in interpretation to the broader public.
Okay, so a comment highlighting the importance of the industrial, Canadian Industrial Heritage Center. Councillor McCreary, you have a comment as well?
Mr. Chair, yes, I think I'm glad that Bev brought that up. I think it should be noted as well that the Canadian Industrial Heritage Center has a property land lease pending with City of Brantford, but it's dependent upon receipt of the record of site condition. And once that's provided by the province of Ontario, then the City of Brantford can lease the space to the CIHC, and then they'll have a physical presence on the land.
Okay. Any other comments that need to be added onto this? So we have 2 comments right now. Okay, I don't see any. So I would entertain a mover and a seconder. And Chris has brought that up on our screen there for us, what the comments would be. So if you can take that off, Chris, sorry. So I can see everyone. So I need a mover and a seconder for that motion. Moved by Sarah. Need a seconder. Cindy. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, I don't see any. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? Swipe through. Perfect. All those opposed? I don't think that there's any. Perfect, carried. Moving on, we're now on to consent items. Number 5, we need a mover and a seconder for the minutes from our meeting way back when in March. Councillor Wall, you're moving. A seconder? Looking for a hand. I'm not seeing one. Oh, Bev, there you go. Okay. Any errors or omission that need to be corrected or addressed with the minutes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of approval of the minutes? Okay. All those opposed, which I think is no one. Perfect. Carried. Projects or other updates. There are none. Our subcommittees also have not been meeting, so I don't think that there's any need to go over those because we can't really meet right now. So there are no resolutions and no notices of motion. So I believe that takes us to item 10, which is in German, and I need a mover for that. Moved by Councillor Wall. Okay, thank you everyone for this meeting tonight. I think we did pretty well for our first virtual meeting. And I look forward to seeing you all again in July for our other meeting. Thanks,
everyone.
Good job,
Nathan. Good job.